Okay, welcome in. Now going to be continuing my 32 and 32 with the Arizona Coyotes. So last season, the Arizona Coyotes finished the regular season 28 wins, 40 losses, 14 overtime losses slash shootout losses for 70 points. They finished fourth in the Central Division, and this has now been their second straight year where they played in that division. And to me, it's still kind of new. I'm so used to seeing them in the Pacific Division, but because the Seattle Kraken, the newest franchise in the NHL, have joined the Pacific Division, therefore that bumped the Coyotes over to the Central Division. So despite being in another division, they still were unsuccessful in trying to compete for a playoff spot. The last time they made the playoffs was in the 2020 season when they had the little bubble. They beat the Nashville Predators 3-1 in a play-in round to qualify for the playoffs, and then they got bounced by the Colorado Avalanche in 5 games. So it was very short-lived, but I'm sure if you're a Coyotes fan, you're pretty hyped about defeating the Predators. The Coyotes are likely heading into their third straight season without a captain. Oliver Ekman-Larsson was their captain prior, was traded to the Vancouver Canucks after the 2021 season. The Central Division, in my opinion, is going to be extremely competitive this upcoming year, especially when you have the likes of the Colorado Avalanche, the Dallas Stars, and the Minnesota Wild. Those three teams, I believe, should be almost a lock to make the playoffs yet again this year. And speaking of the Stars, they made it all the way to the conference final, so I don't see them dropping off anytime soon. For the Yotes, I think it's going to be a tough yet again. They did have a few key signings, but again, I don't see this team having a major improvement. And like I said, they might maybe get a few more points this year, maybe get a few more wins, but I just don't see them really going all out and being extremely competitive, especially when there's only two wild card spots. Uh, where was I? In my opinion, and I'm not trying to disrespect, and I know it's 2023, you got to be very careful with your words. They don't really have a number one goalie, and I will be getting into their players and their rosters and stuff like that. But when you think of the Arizona Coyotes, no one really sticks out as someone that's like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. He's going to be fantastic. He's going to be their franchise goalie going into the future. There's really no one that really sticks out. And in my opinion, their defense hasn't really improved, especially after they traded away Jacob Churkin to the Ottawa Senators. I believe this team is kind of like in limbo. They're not really completely rebuilding, but with that being said, they're not really a lock and competing for a playoff spot either. So they're pretty much just stuck in the middle. I honestly, truly believe that despite the signings that they did have, and I will go over the signings as soon as I'm done with this, that it's going to be another long year for the Arizona Coyotes, and I truly think it's going to be 4 straight seasons without seeing any postseason action. So I'll go over a few of their key signings, and then I'll go into their roster and go over see what players are still signed or what players have signed elsewhere. So they have signed Jason Zucker, who played with the Pittsburgh Penguins, to a 1-year deal. Nick Bjugstad has come back after they traded him to the Edmonton Oilers. He is now signed for 2 seasons. Troy Stetcher, I believe, came over from the Calgary Flames. He is now signed on a 1-year contract. Alex Kerfoot, who's come over from the Toronto Maple Leafs, has now signed for 2 years. Travis Dermott, who I believe played for the Canucks just a season ago, signed for a 1-year deal. Zach Sanford, I believe, I forgot to see where he signed, played last year. I think it was Winnipeg? I can't honestly remember. He's now signed for a 1-year deal. The goaltender, Ivan Prosvetov, signed for a 1-year contract. Matthias Michelli has signed for 3 years. Jake McBain has signed for 2 more seasons. And Matt Dumba has stayed in the Central Division, but he has left the Minnesota Wild to join the Arizona Coyotes. So now I'll take a look at their roster, so just bear with me. And before I get into that, I got to admit, or just say, I do like the older logo for the Coyotes. It's kind of like a throwback to when I first came into the league back in the late 90s. So I'll take a look at the rosters. So I guess I'll start. I'm going to flip this around. So I guess I'll start with the goaltending situation. So Karel Vejmilka is their starter goaltender. He's signed for 2 more seasons. As I mentioned prior, Ivan Prozivetvov has signed 1 more year, so that will be your 1-2 goaltending tandem for this upcoming season. And if I can get into the all skaters, and we'll take a look and see who is still there. Oops, this is a little crooked. And who is signed with another team. So Travis Boyd still signed for 1 more year. Josh Brown still signed for 1 more year. Lawson Krause is still signed for 4 more seasons. What is this? Delphine. What is he? Lauren Dolphin still has yet to re-sign. Christian Fisher, I believe, has signed elsewhere. All right. He signed with the Detroit Red Wings. Barrett Hayton still signed for 1 more year. Zach Cassian, I think his contract got bought out. And I believe he's trying to do like what is that called? A PTO, I believe, with yet another team. So he only had 1 year with the Coyotes. Milos Kaliman, I believe, is still signed for 1 more year. Clayton Keller, face of the franchise, is going to be there for 5 more seasons. Andrew Ladd is telling me that he is an unrestricted free agent, but if we take a look at his stats here real quickly, the last time he played was the 2021-22 campaign. He played 51 games. I don't believe he played this past season, but I think his contract is just there. And it's kind of like just how Brian Little's contract's there. Their contracts are there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're living in Arizona. Matthias Michelli, I believe, he did resign. Connor McKay has signed with the New York Rangers. Jake McBain, I believe I said has re-signed. Yanis Jerome Moser still has 1 more year left to go on his contract. Patrick Nemeth has 1 more year left to go on his contract, as does Liam O'Brien. Brett Ritchie has still yet to re-sign. Nick Schmaltz still has 3 more years left on his contract. Nate Smith, I'm pretty sure he re-signed as well. And Victor Soderstrom has re-signed. He still has another year left on his contract. Just got to wait for that. Yeah, he still has 1 more year left to go on his contract. Yusuf Balamaki, his contract did expire, but he did sign a 1-year, $1 million contract to remain as a Coyote. And Jacob Voracek, just like Brian Little, their contracts are with the Coyotes, but the player himself is put on the LTIR. And speaking of the LTIR, Shea Weber hasn't played since the 2021 campaign with the Montreal Canadiens. This past season, his contract was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights in the offseason, and then I think around the trade deadline, his contract got flipped to the Arizona Coyotes. So if you have someone on the injured reserve and LTIR, just call up the Arizona Coyotes. They'll gladly take that person and their contract off your hands. So as I mentioned before, so we'll go back to the main Play Now screen. As I mentioned before, even though they do have quite a few signings and some of them are fairly bigger names, I just think it's still going to be a long year for the Arizona Coyotes. It's tough. I mean, like I said, they've never really been a team that has been super competitive year in and year out. I do remember back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, they seemed to make the playoffs every year, but they always got bounced in the first round. And then the closest they got to the Stanley Cup final was back in 2012 when they got all the way to the conference final, but then the Kings took them out in 5 games. So aside from that, like I said, they've never had any Stanley Cup final appearance. That's the only time they made the conference final was in 2012, so that would have been 11 years ago. And I don't see it happening anytime soon. And then the fact that they're not even playing in a regular NHL arena just goes to show that their future could very well be up in the air. Do they get relocated? Do they find another arena in the state of Arizona and try to be on life support, which is pretty much all it is the team's just on life support. And if you're a Coyotes fan, I feel terrible because there's all this speculation, all these rumors. The team could move here, the team might stay, but where is their home building actually going to be? There's just a lot of questions with this franchise going forward, and I just don't have the answers. Kind of a bit of a rant there, but anyways, thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, take care.